On today's World Insight, India, the target of spiraling U.S. tariffs, reportedly overbuying Russian oil. New Delhi circles the wagons, tightening its belt to cope with adverse U.S. policy. But where does that leave trade relations between the world's largest and fourth biggest economies?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Indian goods are facing additional U.S. tariffs to up to 50%, among the highest imposed by Washington, due to its increased purchases of Russian oil. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday issued a statement in support of small entrepreneurs and farmers, saying no matter how much pressure comes, India will keep increasing its strength to withstand. Meanwhile, a planned visit by U.S. trade negotiators to New Delhi from August 25th to 29th was canceled. Shortly after the cancellation, U.S. President Donald Trump said last week he would nominate a U.S. ambassador to India. For deeper insights on the latest developments and the interesting relationship between Washington and New Delhi now, let's loop in our panelists. For more on the U.S. tariffs on India, we have in Washington, D.C., Robert Rokowski, Professor of Trade and Economic Diplomacy with the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. Also in Washington, Surab Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist with the Institute of China-American Studies. In New Delhi, Avinash Godbole, Professor from Jindal Global University. In Beijing, last but not least, Zhou Rong, Senior Analyst from the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies with Renmin University of China. Gentlemen, what a pleasure to see all of you. Now, 50% tariff on India export to the United States. Professor Rokowski, what do you think is the nature of this number?
Of course, it's a big number. And it's the kind of number that is intended to send a very serious message, because it makes many goods from India prohibitively expensive in the United States. And so it comes in two parts, 25%, and then an additional punitive 25%, apparently because India buys Russian oil. So it is going to be devastating for India, in part because the United States, as you know, is India's largest trading partner. So this is going to be a significant signal to India.
Professor Godbole, how is that message being received in New Delhi and elsewhere in your country?
Well, in New Delhi, the message is being received with a bit of anger and a bit of frustration. The Indian-American partnership is old and has been developing very well. But Trump's understanding of the world and the world order is quite different, and we must say a bit dramatic. India is being punished unfairly, is the prevailing perception in India, in media, and I'm sure government is also thinking in that way. India doesn't have as much leverage over Russia as some of the other countries may have. So to punish India alone for the Russian oil at this point of time is unfair. And there's a bit of anger among people as well as the government.
We have seen analysts suggesting, Washington and Moscow were having quite some close interactions with one another. Washington, at the same time, is punishing whoever is doing trade with Russia, for example, India buying oil from Russia. How does that logic work?
Well, I use apparently with this administration because it's so hard to figure why they're doing what they're doing. And the implementation of these kinds of aggressive tariffs is an exercise in power and often performance politics in Washington. And I think that it may have been partly because of India's strong stand on continuing to protect its agricultural sector, which is a very strong part of President Trump's base. He also maybe was reacting to the idea that India was not as supportive of his peace efforts in the India-Pakistan conflict, which he wanted to claim some credit for. And also his meeting in his meetings with Vladimir Putin have been very frustrating. And so this is a form of expressing his stance against Russia without really so directly punishing Russia. So there are many elements to this. It's a little hard to interpret just what caused this application of 50%.
Professor Gopali, do you see most of the Indians, at least the Indian policymakers, believe the latest quote-unquote punitive tariff by the current administration in Washington as a result of India buying oil from Russia? How is India digesting this acquisition coming from Washington? Well, Washington and Moscow were having some close discussions.
Well, not just India, but China also buys oil from Russia. So why is India being exceptionally punished? And the historical oil purchases from Europe has also given Russia the leverage to undertake the war machinery building. So India is buying oil after the war starting is not making an exception to the Russian economy. Whereas Biden administration saw India as a stabilizing factor, this administration by Trump looks at it quite differently. So, I mean, I think some of the people in Delhi did not see it coming the way it has happened. But I also agree with Professor Rosky that it's the India-Pakistan situation. And we see Trump as quite a credit-hungry person, and he wanting to have the credit for stabilizing the India-Pakistan relations. Also because of domestic political pressure in India and the debate in the Indian parliament, the government had to say that it happened because of Pakistan's admission and discussion with India. So we want to keep India-Pakistan relations as direct and bilateral as possible. We would have seen Trump's activity as intervention, and quite agreeably he has got angry for not getting credit for the peace building. So there are a lot of factors building into this discussion here.
Right. Now the question is, with that likely to be implemented, what's likely to be the result of this policy, not only on India's economy, but also, even more importantly, on the decisions coming out of New Delhi as to who to deal with, how much to deal with, which areas to deal with, and also what is your general idea as to whether follow the leadership of Washington or not on issues of bilateral or multilateral areas? Professor Gopali?
I think there's a bit of confusion as to who one is dealing with when talking with Trump administration. You get different messages from the White House, different messages from the departments, and different messages from the embassy in Delhi. That is what I hear from my friends in media and government as well. So it's difficult. The difficulty of getting one singular message, that is a bit of a problem. But a lot of people also believe that this transactional nature of Donald Trump means some kind of counter deal that can be worked very fast. There's a lot of optimism as well that this can be dealt with rapidly. But this confusion is not entirely over on who is the right person sending the right message and who is the right way to communicate with when you're talking with President Trump.
Mr. Joe, what do you make of what you are seeing? After all, we understand the latest U.S. administration also threatened recently of throwing about 200% punitive tariffs on all Chinese exports to the United States as well. So what do you make of the latest fiasco between India and United States?
I think both India and America will continue their discussion and their negotiation. And I think right now, India will show its what we say friendly way towards the ICO as well as BRICS, wanted to show that America is not only their choice. They, to a certain degree, they may think America is not very reliable to a certain degree, though they are strategic partnership. So they still think we should have more choices. We should use a more international platform to what we say to continue our multinational diplomacy, to have more friends, not only to make friends with America. They will continue their friendship with Russia without bowing down to the USA.
Professor Gopali, Do you think India, the New Delhi administration, is giving a second thought as to what is likely to be the balance they need to tick? And as a big power, India itself, how is India likely to walk on that tightrope, not only between China and United States, but also India directly to the U.S.?
There are a lot of other choices that Indian government has to make. Once again, the idea of strategic autonomy is brought back into the discussion, but also that India has consistently maintained that our foreign policy choices are based on our own requirements. So that stand will remain permanent. But there are other aspects that government of India is doing, and I hope does continue to do, is focus on domestic reforms. So reforms have happened in past when crisis and challenges have come. So a lot of people are discussing that this is a good opportunity to undertake reforms, say in the electricity sector, in the other infrastructure sector, and ease of doing business sector. So you might see some of these domestic changes happening as a consequence of pressure coming from the international level. But on foreign policy, I don't think any changes will happen already because the foundations and the structure of international order is the same as it was even before Trump, and it will remain the same even after him. So I think first you will see some domestic economic changes as a response, and then if any foreign policy changes, they might be visible only 4 to 6 months afterwards, not immediately.
It is not just India. As we mentioned, China was also threatened just recently by the U.S. president about 200%. Of course, the same kind of threats were being thrown at other capital as well. For example, Brazil. Look at these three countries. They are the backbones of the BRICS, and South Africa as well. So Brazil, South Africa, and India, China, Russia and Washington is having their discussion. So this is very interesting how these countries are being singled out, and the paramount threat being given to these countries. Meanwhile, we also see these countries are coming ever closer in their reactions toward Washington. What is your observation, Mr. Gupta?
That's an interesting point. It is the BRICS countries which have individually been hit in different ways and have been hit harder than the others. And even though the BRICS countries are in different states of their relationships with the United States, the impact and the effect of what Mr. Trump is doing is in some respects been kind of the same to all of them. But I think the bottom line for all the countries is each of them knows they need to deal directly with Mr. Trump and with the Americans to try to resolve their own matters. And each is doing that in different ways, depending on the state of their relationship.
Mr. Zhou, in Beijing, some of these countries that we mentioned have apparently individually shown to the United States so far they are not going to budge. And they are portraying, they are going in their own directions and with their own policies, with their own strategies, their own goals, in cooperation, could be, with the United States. How do you see this very interesting phenomenon almost collectively reflected on these countries?
Because they all have to do some counter sanctions. So they have a lot of common languages on this issue. So this time, it is America who made other countries to be more closer, to have a lot of things to discuss about how to counter sanctions separately, even sometimes together. So I think that is a good phenomenon for the global south or for the newly developing economy, especially for BRICS. They may make a BRIC used to be loose, right now to be more united, international club on counter sanctions of America.
Professor Gaboli, is the U.S. making the BRICS ever closer to one another?
I think he's 10 years late in doing that. But the intra-BRICS trade should increase irrespective of Trump and should have grown irrespective of Trump as well. It has not grown. Scientific cooperation and other cooperation, sectoral cooperations that should have grown has not really grown as well as it should have. So BRICS will have to wait and watch what they do. But I don't think Trump is the reason exactly for that. As a developing country and developing country status, BRICS has a lot to offer, whether or not Trump is in power at any point in time here.
Very interesting to look at these countries, not only India, China, but also Brazil, which is going to host the COP30 in the next couple of months, and also South Africa, G20 leaders meeting. So there are a lot of things ahead in the rest of this year. So the current stage of fiasco between the United States and these BRICS countries, what could that mean for the global agenda later half of the year? Mr. Rogowski.
I think it has profound implications for the global agenda. Indeed, it's reasonable to say that the world has never faced anything like this in the relevant period of time for the people who are practicing the diplomacy in the world today. We have never had a nation as large as the United States going rogue like this. $29 trillion being run by a very different kind of government with a very different kind of foreign policy. The G20 is, of course, as the other speakers have said, come together, whether it's in BRICS or the Shanghai Agreement or the G20, and think about how do we handle this huge country that we used to rely on, and now we cannot. And does that mean it only lasts for the next 3 years? Or is this a new normal for the United States? And how do you respond to that? And every country is trying to think, how do we do it individually? And how do we do it collectively? And I agree with my colleagues here. This really will push a sense of collectivity among the nations because this is such a large disruption.
Mr. Gupta, your thoughts on that? Is this tactical or is this strategic? There is a huge difference in this. And is this apparently coming together, more of every country trying to create an air so that they can be stronger in front of the United States? Or is it really going to the bones of BRICS or other multilateral platforms to make everyone more strategically aligned, minus the United States?
I'd say the other countries are more like deers in the headlight. They've suddenly been thrown into this situation, and they are trying to do the best that they can in that situation. They're just not used to think. They go to multilateral summits and they put these joint statements out and try to get working together. But they need a sort of somebody who's leading from the front or leading from behind or leading. And suddenly they find that they don't have this sort of a leader anymore, and they need to step up and do something. And they haven't yet really stepped up per se. They're all doing their little things a little bit more better, a little more differently. So we'll have to see how this plays out. You know, Mr. Trump's the Treasury Secretary of State have not attended the G20 related summit meetings that the South Africans have held. We don't even know if Mr. Trump is going to show up out there. At every treaty that has been sought to be finalized or signed, especially environment-related treaties, Mr. Trump has stood against it this year. So can they stand up? They need to. I'd like to see what the leaders have to say at the UN General Assembly in terms of how they approach these matters, and then go about at the various venues in trying to up their game. But it's hard to say because that's not how they've been wired in terms of actually stepping up, and I hope this will be a moment when they'll see that they just need to do these things.
Professor Gobole, how is the world going to change? I have no idea to tell at this moment, but all of these bits and pieces throughout history could be interesting references.
Yes, history always has a reference, but when the non-alignment came, there were two poles. There was a bipolar world order, and there was rest of Asia was not developing as rapidly as it is right now. Right now, in China are large developing economies. I would also like to highlight that India's expectations from the ASEO summit will be slightly low because the backdrop will also be of the terrorism incident that happened in India and the India-Pakistan clash. So India expects an institution like SCO to react to these institutions, to these incidents favorably, because SCO's motto has been counterterrorism and counter-extremism as well. So India, as a member of SCO, India expects more from SCO. So I hope it does go in that direction as well.
Before we go, what do you think will be the nature of this latest fiasco between Washington and New Delhi? The regional relationship, and also in terms of how the multilateral interactions are to take place in the near future. Professor Rogowski.
It's a great question. I want to go back to your point about tactical versus strategic, that question. And I think it's good to think about this because it's such a disruptive thing for the United States to be one kind of huge player in the system and frankly, one of the founders of the international trading system that we have had for the last 80 years to become such a disruptive force. And I think everyone is now behaving tactically, and it's going to take time for them to come together to develop a good strategy or strategies to deal with this great disruption, particularly when you don't know if this is a real disruption or a short disruption. And let me leave it with this. If you go back to the February leaders' statement between India and the United States, it is a brilliant and very productive statement about how these two nations should work together, a whole of government approach. And this is exactly what the United States and India should be doing. It's what the United States and China should be doing. It's what the United States and Europe should be doing. It's a wonderful roadmap for how to work together productively. Now the nations see the rapid shift from that statement to what Trump has done today or this month, and they understand the nature of the uncertainty that they face. Right. Strategies have to be evolved.
Strategy to be evolved. Mr. Zhou, your thoughts on that?
One American think something should be in favor of America. They don't care whether they are ally or not. They will do on their own will.
I see. Yeah. Professor Gobole?
Well, interest-based cooperation will continue with between countries, whether it be US or China and India and other required countries as well. Also, the social foundations of India-US relations are strong, and they have grown despite the government. India-US government relations began much later. Our social, academic, and economic relations grew faster. Also, one thing I should mention that US has just appointed a new ambassador in Delhi, and that should ease things much faster. We didn't have an ambassador from US for several months now, so a new ambassador should be able to do things faster. But yes, interest-based cooperation will continue as a formula for a larger country like India to work with whoever is interested in working with us.
Mr. Gupta, your thoughts?
I'll just make 2 points on this. One is a lot of the investment of US diplomacy in India has suffered, I think, a fairly grievous setback. Indians had always been a little skeptical in terms of these unilateral sanctions, and the US said, oh, no, we are now good friends, good partners, and so don't worry about sanctioning you and weaponizing our leverage with regard to you. And while the US had a lot of unilateral sanctions against all and sundry, including India always was given an exception from them, the CAATSA sanctions, et cetera, or the Iran oil sanctions. India got its exceptions. Right now, with Mr. Trump, it's getting nothing. And therefore, I think it has been a wake-up call. A lot of what the Americans have said it's haunting them in terms of can we trust America in the long term, even though we have very significant interest-based cooperation right now. So from the Indian perspective, I think that's how they're looking at it. The other point I'd make with regard to the historical analogy, as you were mentioning, and which for me, I think the most apt historical analogy is the interwar years, where we had Great Britain, which used to be furnishing global public goods. It became this tired hegemon. It could not provide that support. Yeah. Well, the United States was not yet ready to do so. And right now, of course, it's not about one country transitioning to another, but we have a similar situation where the US may not really be willing to uphold the international public goods that it used to furnish. And can the other countries within the system, the major players particularly, take on that burden and help push that for the reform of that system and for it to work productively going forward?
Saurabh Gupta, Robert Kogowski, Avinash Goboli, and Joe Rohn. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow.